Learn the most empowering hiring techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with your host, Rick Gerard.
All right, so when Mark opened his chain of specialty coffee shops, he was determined to scale fast without losing control. He rolled out EOS across all locations, including org charts, meeting rhythms, scorecards. It was a dream for operations, but hiring was a nightmare. Despite a clear process, new managers and baristas kept churning. Some clashed with the team. Others didn't care about the brand's mission. The work got done, but the energy in the shops was gone, and customers felt it. That's when Mark realized the gap. EOS had helped him structure his business, and it had done nothing for him to hire. Now, core values he proudly printed on his wall weren't showing up in the interviews or in the people he brought on board. In this episode, we're going to expose the EOS blind spot that sinks culture and hiring, and why most leaders fall for the core values con job, and how to build a team where the right people not only fit, they elevate your culture. Now, I'm Rick Gerard. Welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest people. We do so by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Mr. Brett Hoogeveen. Now, Brett is an international leadership and culture expert and co-founder of Better Culture, a leadership technology firm that helps companies build better leaders, stronger teams, and thriving workplace cultures. Now, Brett has trained thousands of leaders and partnered with hundreds of executive teams from scrappy startups to Fortune 500 giants. Earlier in his career, he served as the youngest executive ever in an organization voted the #1 best place to work, and in its metropolitan area 5 times in a row. He's the host of the Better Culture podcast, which helps organizations turn culture into a competitive advantage. And he shares practical tools, proven strategies, and continuous belief in better culture equals better business, which is what makes Brett the perfect expert for today's topic today. Brett, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show.
Thanks, Rick. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. It's funny, like you just shared with me that, hey, I think we aligned better than we thought we were.
Yes.
There might be too much agreeing and not enough fighting on this show. All right, so I want to start out with the thought that we're talking about culture, and you and I have both experienced it a ton of times. I've walked into so many companies where words on the wall, they're all great words, but then you meet with the CEO and you're going, where did you come up with these things? This happened to me not too long ago. I met with the CEO and they pulled from Patrick Lencioni's book, Humble, Hungry, Smart, and that was their core values.
Yep.
And it became very apparent within 10 minutes of a conversation with the CEO that guy was not humble at all. As a matter of fact, he was super arrogant. And everybody who worked around him was that way too. This kind of really drills down on the concept of your culture is driven really by behaviors. And I think we're in alignment there. And this is where I want to kind of open the conversation, is that it's your behaviors that drive company culture, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's my definition for culture, is the attitudes and behaviors that a group of people come to expect from one another. And putting them on the wall as core values is maybe a good first step in that process. But the big question is, if you ask people that walk into that office or show up virtually on a random Tuesday, you say, what do you expect to run into today from your colleagues, from your manager, from your organization? What attitudes, what behaviors are the people that you work with going to show up with? That's your culture. Now, if they happen to say they're going to perfectly live out these 4 core values, then I guess they're highly correlated, but usually that's not the case.
You and I probably have both seen like integrity and respect and teamwork and all these things that are these concepts, but they're not really aligned to specific behaviors a lot of times that drive those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I don't know if this is okay, but in our pre-talk, you said we got to talking about the entrepreneurial operating system and EOS. And one of the big sort of things that people like to lead into on that when it comes to culture is it says like set core values, right? And that's good advice for in almost any organization. Figure what are the values you would see employees show up and exhibit. But very few companies go very far beyond that. And so I'm in the culture space. I run a company called Better Culture. And when I ask someone about what they're doing from a culture perspective, a lot of times they will just, they'll start talking about perks that they offer, like unique benefits, or, oh, we have foosballs or casual Fridays, or we have, this, 6 weeks of paid time off, or we have, and I say, I want to say to them, like, what does that have to do with culture? You're not describing any behaviors of how people show up on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, it's
So,
not free donuts on Wednesday.
no, those are perks, like that. It has
Yeah.
something to do with what it's like to work at your organization, but it has almost nothing to do with whether or not people feel safe challenging one another on a discussion, or feel appreciated at work, or fill in the blanks, all the things that I think of as culture related.
Yeah, so let's drill down on that a little bit more because, again, I see this all the time too. The idea of our culture is very free flowing and we have work from home Wednesdays and, all these other things. That's not really a culture. That's like a work environment.
Yeah.
So leaders purely misunderstand what culture is. That's one of the issues. What are the other issues that or the other problems that you kind of identified in this space?
I want to mention one thing you said in the intro. You said, I talk about the quote unquote core values con job. And so the other thing, when I talk to organizations about their culture, they talk about benefits and perks. The other thing they talk about is their core values. And they'll say, well, like, this is kind of what our culture is. And I've gotten to calling it a little bit of a con job because someone, I don't know who the person is, but someone has convinced most of the market that you should have core values, and that is somehow central to culture. Most organizations have some form of core values, whether they call it a culture code or some other term. But this idea of having values is pretty common and widely accepted. But what almost never happens after that, a mistake that most organizations make, is they think that has something to do with actually changing employee behavior, shaping culture, right? Culture is behavior, culture is attitudes. And just simply having core values without some plan to say, no, 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 how do we take every single person that works for us and shift the way they show up every single day to be more like the ideal culture we want to have, more like
Yeah.
those ideal core values. So I would say that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see, is organizations think that by having values that somehow that's shaping culture. And most of the time it's not.
I think I heard a podcast you were on not too long ago where you said something like, hey, look, at every company has core values or every company has a culture. I remember my dad saying to me a long time ago, you either manage your business or your business manages you.
Yeah.
It's like you manage your culture or your behaviors, or your culture and behaviors manage you. And if you let them go awry, if people don't know what that North Star is for behavioral expectations, then of course things are just going to continue to go south for your business.
Yeah, I agree. And, a lot of leaders will spend a lot of time. I've recently gotten into the strategic planning business with executive teams and things like that. And I'm trying to convince the market that they need what I do. I haven't exactly opened up a giant market yet, but it's amazing to me, Rick. Like, every company does strategic planning for the business. What locations are we going to open? Where are we going to invest? Where we, make a 5-year plan. But when I say, do you have a strategic plan for culture? Now, these same executives will tell me, of course, culture matters. Of course, employee engagement matters. They know it makes a difference in their business. But I'll say, so you have like a 5-year plan for that? Do you know where you are today, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there? No, almost nobody does. Right?
Yeah, their eyes glassed over,
Again,
right?
there's something wrong with this. If you really believe that culture is valuable, which I do, and I know you do as well, then do you have a plan to make it better? And it just blows me away that very few organizations have a plan that they can articulate strategically, saying, how are we going to be better next year than we are this year?
So very true. And it really comes down to, as a leader, owning who you are. There's this concept, and I think you shared with me the principles from Ray Dalio's book. But I mean, there's a lot of highly productive businesses with quote unquote toxic cultures. But here's the thing. They've got people in the business that are highly dysfunctional. However, they're happy. They have destructive behaviors, but they're probably happy and they're probably super productive. I mean, like, you have a group of psychopaths
Yeah.
in this company that are just flourishing, right? And when they get into trouble is when they hire a non-psychopath.
Yeah. So I'll only argue with one thing that you said, which is, I don't think most of the time they're happy. So you said they're probably happy. Some of them might be, but I think if you run an organization from a command and control of fear, this is a pretty hostile place to work. but we scare everybody into showing up and doing their job at meeting a certain level of excellence. You can run a business that way. You can. And I've
Yeah.
seen many successful businesses that run that way. I think two big issues that come up and reasons why people who own and operate businesses that way may want to rethink and think about if they can moderate and start to grow a different leadership muscle is number one, I think it will improve their quality of life. I think they will like leading a healthy culture and a healthy team in a more, what I'll call modern way. I think it'll improve their quality of life and it'll improve the quality of life of their people. So maybe you
For sure.
think they're really happy, but in general, what I have seen is they're stressed out, they're frustrated, they're mad at everybody, and they think that's just what work is. Like that's what it means to do a job. And that's nuts, if you ask me.
I disagree with you. I don't operate that way, but like I've gone into environments like you have where you're like, these people are all batshit crazy.
Yes.
You
So the
know,
other thing that those types of leaders are missing is that because of their worldview and the way that they've worked and where they've operated, they don't understand how much of the labor force will not come work for them. Or if they do, they'll leave very quickly.
Yeah.
And that is a growing portion of the market. Sometimes when I do keynote like presentations, sometimes I'll poll the audience and I'll describe a toxic culture and I'll say anonymously, please be honest, but tell me how much extra money per year would it take for you to go work somewhere like that? And some segment of the group says not much, $500 a year, zero, like I'd work there. But 50, 60, 70% of the audience says either it would take a lot of money to make me work in a company like that, or no amount of money would make me take a job like that. And so if you build the type of culture that increasingly people don't want to be a part of, you're just slicing off a giant portion of the labor market and saying, well, we can't hire from that pool.
so very true. Are you listening to the Higher Power Radio Show? For our podcast listeners, we'll take a quick educational moment from our sponsors.
Hey, this is Brent Skinner, host of Small Talk Window here at the Work Defined Podcasting Network. Have you ever wanted a short podcast to listen to during a coffee break of your workday? You've come to the right place. My guests dispense with the small talk as quickly as possible and settle into a meaningful conversation around the world of work.
All right, I'm digging in deeper with our guest, Brett Hoogeveen. He is the co-founder of Better Culture, and we're talking about, guess what? Culture. And actually the behaviors that drive culture, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we solve this problem. I mean, we're essentially a problem solution show, and the idea is that we want to give other entrepreneurs like ourselves, the tools that they can take this to their team and implement some actionable things to move their business forward. And there's also an easy solution, which is they can hire us. So let's talk a little bit about how do we solve the problem? Where do we start?
Yeah.
Maybe run through the steps for me, like how you would tackle this.
So if you want to improve your workplace culture, and if you want to focus, step number one, in my opinion, is to get more behavioral. And we touched on that in the first half of the conversation. And so you've got to make culture behavioral, not theoretical. And so if you're working with things like have integrity, communicate, show trust, some of these classical sort of core values that honestly, Rick, where a lot of those core values come from was they're supposed to be values for the whole company. Like we want our customers and our clients to know that we have integrity as a bank or something, right? It wasn't intended.
Enron had integrity.
Yes, exactly, right. And there's an element of a marketing exercise that goes into, employer branding marketing exercise that goes into some of these core values. But if your core values do not describe the behaviors of employees that you want them to show up with on an everyday basis, step number one is to redo your core values, candidly. Now, you don't have to do that, or you can just get a little bit more specific about, okay, go deeper. So be more specific, describe in detail what a star employee would do, what a perfect team member would do. How would they show up? What would their attitude be? What behaviors would they exhibit? And the more specific you can get on that note, then the more you can coach toward that, hire toward that, reward that, do things that actually move the needle on culture, which again is changing employee behavior.
Let's drill into that a little bit. For example, one of my core values is dig deeper. What that means is listen to understand, not to respond. Continue to ask deeper level questions so that you understand the root issue.
Yeah.
And essentially, that's the guiding principle, right? That's the overall core value.
Yeah.
What do you think the behavior is that drives that for us?
So I heard a couple things when you just shared, and I love that, by the way. I think one of the most overlooked skills, not just from leaders, but especially from leaders in today's modern world, is the skill of listening.
Yep.
and listening to understand and listening to learn, not listening to respond or to fix or to win an argument.
Yeah.
And so I love that as a core value. And I think one of the behaviors that you would see is silence while someone else speaks. You would see quiet reflection. You would see people asking short questions, not making long statements after someone talks, right? So
Yep.
tell me more. What happened then? How'd that make you feel? Is this what you're trying to say? And then listening again. So am I in alignment with what you're looking
Yeah.
for?
So the two behaviors that actually drive that core value for us, one is listening. The second is curiosity.
Mhm.
We actually discovered that all of us within the business are very curious naturally. And curiosity is something it's a behavior that's measurable. I can figure out whether or not somebody is a curious person by just understanding what's the most recent thing they've learned or have taught themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an easy thing, I guess, to see if people are reading new things, learning new things. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense to me, for sure.
Okay.
And, being able to measure, it doesn't have to be, yeah, this is my opinion. It doesn't have to be objectively measurable. It can be subjectively measurable, right? Like you can tell if people have learned something new so I don't want to go too deep down that, but I think sometimes like have a positive attitude. Okay. Measure that for me. I don't know. Like objectively, that's hard, but subjectively, that's pretty easy. Right. And so when it comes to culture, don't shy away from some of those things that may be more subjectively measurable than objectively measurable. And I know that's controversial, but that's my
No,
opinion.
that's where we're going to differ because I like objective data. I like a yes or no answer, not a theoretical. It never sat well with me as a headhunter when somebody would say, "Well, you know what? I just don't think they align with this value in our culture." I'm like, "Well, why?" Well, just something they said just didn't sit right with me. I've been doing a lot of psychology studying on gut feel
Mhm.
because I've been really digging into that whole thing. And the gut's wrong more often than not. It's designed for fight or flight, and it's a quick reaction. And quite frankly, it doesn't show up well in today's business world.
I think in recruiting and hiring, I would tend to agree with you. You're trying to make a quick judgment on a candidate based on a limited interaction. Where I would probably disagree is if on a team, if
Yeah.
there's someone who just doesn't take feedback, who makes it hard for a group of people to collaborate or to talk, there's just something that they're doing that's making conversation hard or that's making other people not want to volunteer. Sometimes it's hard to objectively say exactly what it is, but there's still something there. And then if you want to have a great culture, you got to say, okay, we got to talk about whatever this thing is because
Yeah.
it's causing an issue. And even though I can't perfectly objectively measure it, there's something happening here. And so some people go so far into staying away from something that isn't objective to say, who are you to say I have a bad attitude? Somebody's got to just decide if this is a bad attitude or not. Like
Yeah, for
it's gonna
sure.
be me today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, so I think you're looking at it through the lens of people that you already have on board.
Yeah.
Where I'm looking at it through the lens of, hey, I'm about to hire somebody. How do I know that they're not going to come in and destroy our culture?
Yes.
That happens probably more frequently than anything else. I mean, the most disruptive person in the business is the new person who joins the company they're either a fountain or a drain very quickly.
Yeah. Not to spend too much time here, but when you're trying to make a hiring decision and it's a short amount of time, you're I would imagine, much more likely to have to have various biases pop into that if you're being subjective. And so you're trying to decrease the likelihood that pre-existing experiences or stereotypes or other things are entering your decision-making process as a recruiter. When I'm talking about inside a company, and I've been working with this person for 6 months, right? Like it becomes less of a bias and more of a like, no, I've seen this 26 times. Like I know,
More of an annoyance, right?
and so you get more confident that you're like, no, he is a little toxic or she is a little bit, defensive or whatever those things.
Well, you can actually point to objective, like, okay, things that happened at that point,
Yes.
right? You can
Yes.
say, hey,
Yeah.
look we had a conversation about this 2 weeks back. You got mad, slammed the door, and walked out the office and went for a walk around the block that's unacceptable behavior. I mean, that's pretty objective.
No, for
Pretty
sure.
good evidence.
I think we're getting close to
Yeah.
to agreement here. My culture radar is just going to be a little more finely tuned than yours is I think where we would be here, right? So like slam the door, yeah. Like I might think somebody deserves some coaching and feedback for just leaning back in their chair and crossing their arms in a meeting and not speaking up. Because like all these little things, they make an impact, right? And it's not like you're getting written up, but it's like, hey, could we do better?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're starting with make culture behavioral. What's the next step?
If you want to make actual progress, and that's the big thing, Rick, that we started with, right? Having a set of core values, having that doesn't, that's the con job, is that does something. Okay. And if you want to actually make progress, I like to think of what it takes in order to help a team or an organization make progress on their culture as needing two big pieces. And one is better leadership from the top down.
Yeah.
And the other is more effective followship, more clarity on what every employee can and should be doing to live out those core values and to live up and to help build stronger teams, improve their own performance, and build a better culture for the company. And
For
so
sure.
the first one of those, I guess, is leadership development, and really saying that we've got to have people leaders in those management roles, not just role performers, not just managers, not just people that have a P&L to manage or a project to manage, et cetera. That people that really understand that effective leadership is not pushing directives and projects at people. It's pulling. It's getting people to say, to want to show up and give their best and give their be innovative and contribute more to the organization. And I think that should be easy for people to understand theoretically. I can lead in a way that either makes people feel compelled to do what I say or to follow a process or to meet a timeline, or I can try to lead in a way that helps people want to do all those things, right?
Yeah.
And that's this big push versus pull
Comes down to
dynamic that I
training,
see
man. This
for
comes down to
managers.
really like giving your managers training.
Yeah. I think it starts with mindset, like helping to understand what is your actual job as a manager, in addition to all the things that we got to get done. What do I hope you're accomplishing as a leader? And we have a bunch of training on that to help people build a more practical mindset for leadership. But what I see is people who get put in management roles that struggle to build healthy cultures is they just don't know it's part of their job to help people feel proud of the work that's happening. They don't know it's their job to help people feel seen and valued and appreciated. They don't know it's their job to help people be successful, not just at work, but even in life. And it goes on and on. Like they think their job is to get that project out by Friday. Yeah, that's part of your job. But what about the people in the culture side of your job?
That was the biggest wake up call for me in my career, was when I got promoted from high performer to manager
Mm.
with zero training. And I remember getting reprimanded by boss one day. I'm like, train me on like what to do. And he goes, I don't know what to tell you what to do. Just do what I would do. We're in a high pressure, high performance sales environment.
Yeah.
And God, and I just remember finally I registered for a sales class, and then I registered for a management class, like Management Basics 101. I was failing miserably, and I could do nothing right in that
Yeah.
position either. Like everything that I did, somebody complained about. So if I was too productive and brought in too much revenue, everybody would complain. I'm sure I was using the stick in the wrong way. Like,
Not necessarily. I was just doing a workshop this morning, and the second lesson in a whole course that we teach that has like 56 lessons. The second lesson is leadership. It's not easy.
Yeah.
You're not going to please everybody. You're not going to do everything right. And getting over that hurdle of realizing, oh, my job isn't to make everybody happy. My job is to, whatever that more specific job is. But I love the story, Rick, because I think so many people, myself included, have gone through that, and many are still sitting right there where it's like, I feel I'm worried about my job as a leader because I'm not making anybody happy with what's going on the team.
And it took me a long time to realize, and again, when I kind of got introduced to EOS, I got introduced to the whole idea of like lead for culture and use that as your North Star, right? And then I found that was still very fuzzy. But when you drill it back to behaviors, when you can actually manage the behaviors or understand what behaviors need to be within your people that you're managing, promoting, cultivating relationships with, that's really the key thing. And I think that's where, again, I'm going to drill back on EOS, is it's focused in on this, what are your core values? They just don't drill down deep enough into those behaviors that drive those core values.
Yeah, for sure. Running an organization where you're master planning and you're setting your 5-year, 10-year vision and your 5-year and your quarterlies, and you're telling everybody, hey, our business is going to thrive if everyone can just do the pieces of this plan. Like
Yeah.
if everyone hits these rocks and we that feels great for management. It feels great for ownership. It feels like, wow, we've got everything together. The question really is, from a cultural perspective, how does that feel to everybody else, to not the owner, to not the manager? The question is, everybody else that's got to show up and do their pieces, what are we doing to help them feel more excited about their work, right? And that's really culture, in my opinion, is
Yeah.
they want to feel like they're proud of what they're building. They want to feel like they're being recognized for their achievements. They want to feel like they're growing and developing. They want to feel like they're not working with like toxic coworkers. They want to feel like they can have friendly disagreement. They want to feel like they can enjoy their work. These are the things that really drive and help organizations build culture that pulls performance instead of pushes it via structure.
So essentially what you're doing is you're building those behavioral practices or reinforcing those behaviors in everyday management.
Yes, you're saying your job as a manager is to execute on the strategic plan, make sure we hit all these metrics, and at the same time, make our team culture and every employee's contribution here a little bit better on a regular basis. Build those other things that I just went through, right? That pride and development and protecting the right of good people to work with good people and minimizing interpersonal conflict while maximizing, intellectual disagreement about ideas. Like that's the other part of leadership, in addition to just managing those processes.
So that kind of brings it back to, like, I'm going to go back to the EOS thing. You have the level 10 and then you have the people analyzer when you go through that people component, right? You've got a lot more experience with this, but the way that we personally run the people analyzer is not based on the core value. It's based on the actual behavior.
Sure.
That's where we were rating people. And I feel like that's where it's probably missing the mark within the ecosystem, is that people are trying to, is he hungry, humble, smart?
Right.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yep. Yeah. Give me like 3 boxes, right? Like not really. Yeah. Sort of. Yeah, definitely. Right. Or rating that way. And yeah, that is where you're missing the mark. If you're not clear on the behaviors you want, if you're not making it as behavioral as possible, if you're not being objective, I agree with you. Like you got to be able to, how are we grading someone? Right.
Yeah.
But you can get so much more detailed than that. Right. And we've worked on solving that exact problem in organizations through a new product that we built in the last couple of years, where we asked dozens and dozens of great employers, what does an amazing employee look like? What does a star look like? What behaviors do they show up with? And I don't know if we have time, but would love to share a little bit more about that if you're interested.
We're getting at the end of the episode, but what would you say would be the 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience right now that they should plug into their business today that'll help them get their culture on track?
So if you just want to, short answer to a really big question, make culture as behavioral as possible. Help leaders understand their role and help every employee understand their role. When you want to get better at shaping behaviors, what I will say is most organizations, they don't actually evaluate people very effectively on the core values they have. They don't have development content related to the core values that they have, and they don't really effectively reward and praise and promote people based on, are people living those core values? And if you're not doing any of those things, how can you possibly expect your culture to be better next week than it is this week, or next year than it is this year? So the goal should be progress and continuous improvement, not just saying, here's what our culture is. Now let's get to work.
Gosh, you know what? That's last thing that kind of just popped in my head. When you use those core values as a language too, that's super helpful to like drill it in, those behaviors into people's heads so they understand how they need to act. That's really what we're doing, is setting the direction. Okay. Brett, thanks so much for your time investment today. And I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of the audience can find you? And, give me a quick plug on your 20 tenets of culture product. Yeah.
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn, just Brett Hoogeveen. I'm the only one on there. You'll find me. You can go to betterculture.com, where I really, really, really want to encourage listeners to go. If you found this interesting, and if you'd like to see some examples of a couple of really behavioral core values, and if you'd like some tools that you can actually grab and use for free with your team to get them personally growing and to build healthier teams, there's a sample of this 20 tenets of culture product that we've built. It's an amazing resource. If you're interested in team building and development of your people, go to betterculture.com/higher power. And you can download this premium resource, use it all you want with your team, with your organization. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it, from self-assessment videos, coaching videos, exercises, like a ton of stuff you could do to actually operationalize your culture.
And I've checked it out. It's really good. You guys got to check it out. All right. Well, I want to thank you for tuning this week's episode of Higher Power Radio. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. Please subscribe, review, and share. After all, this show's for you and want to continue to bring you valuable content week after week that you can plug into your business. You can check us out further at higher, H-I-R-E, power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, R-A-D-I-O.com. Or you can drop me an email at rick@intertru.ai. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to hiring success, Rick Gerard.